Today I'm very excited. I'll be talking to Dr. Yvonne Muthien. She's just been recently appointed to the Reserve Bank, but she holds many other board positions and is really somebody that I admire. And I so look forward to talking to you today. Yvonne, thank you so much for making yourself available.
Thank you, Dudu. It's a pleasure.
I was just thinking, you grew up in Ravensmead in Cape Town. And what were your pastimes as a child? How did you keep yourself occupied?
I should say reading, and reading.
Yeah.
But, so I guess I was always a nerd when I was growing up. But as I sort of went into high school and university, also student activist.
Mm-hmm.
But in our days of student activism, it also entailed a lot of reading.
Really?
Yes. I'm a 1976 generation, and that was the height of the Black consciousness movement.
Mm-hmm.
And so we took pride in our intellectual development. We read a lot. We read about Black consciousness, Frantz Fanon, Amilcar Cabral, etc. But we also studied quite a lot of Marxism, Leninism in those years. So in order to inform the conditions of political struggle, we read quite a lot.
I'm so fascinated by that, because one of the main frustration I have is the title "Black Man, You're on Your Own."
Yes.
Goes in my head over and over, and I sometimes think we lack the appreciation of what that means.
Yeah.
That technically we need to be competent, that ethically we need to be on point. There are so many areas that we need to be on point on.
Yes.
And to kind of share with us today that even at that time, you understood that you had to work on your knowledge, you had to read.
Correct.
Do you think we still have the same kind of attitude?
No, I'm afraid the 80s generation that said liberation now, education later, was hugely challenging because it created a gap in knowledge.
Yeah.
Whereas perhaps it was necessary to spur the struggle. It took us a whole long time to recover, because already in the late 1980s we were beginning to say, are we ready to govern? And if we are ready to govern, what kinds of skill sets and knowledge and expertise would it require?
Yeah.
And as a young academic in those years, I saw it as my task to help produce the kinds of skills the country would need for a new democratic South Africa. So, but it was challenging.
Yeah.
Because, young people are impatient by nature. And didn't really want to be bound by sitting down and reading, when it's much more fun being in the streets and throwing stones, etc. So it was challenging, but nevertheless, by the time 1994 arrived, Madiba had a solid pool of specialists, technocrats, intellectuals to draw on to establish the new democratic government.
Yeah, and I'm just thinking now, growing up, what vision did you have for your life?
Very limited to start off with. On Sundays I used to have to go and get my dad from the Shebeen for lunch. So I thought probably the Shebeen Queen was the most powerful woman that I've come across.
It gets everybody there.
Indeed. But I thought I could become a teacher, a school teacher. And then I kind of got to university, and I guess my vision opened. I then wanted to become an academic, but because of the transition we were going through, I did become an academic. We were called to national service, so I had to leave academia behind and go into government.
Yeah, a different version of Tumamina at that time.
Very different, very challenging, quite tough, but enormously rewarding. There is nothing in my entire career that can compare with what we did in the Mandela government.
Yeah, and you think of the symbols, the national orders.
Indeed.
To think you are the mother of all that. I mean, how do you feel?
my career has been more by synchronicity and less planned, or less orderly, I should say. I had a global boss at Coca-Cola that used to say, Yvonne and her checkered career history. But again, that informed a very rich experience. So again, by synchronicity or sheer accident, at the time when Madiba was due to sort of step down as state president, he had realized that one of the tasks that he wanted to tackle was to introduce new national orders or new national symbols in the country.
Yeah, yeah.
And that had sort of lagged behind the bigger tasks of the RDP and, you know, just building, establishing the foundations of a democratic state. So again, I had left government at the end of Madiba's term and gone back to academic research, and I was called back to take on a task of developing new national symbols, of which I knew almost nothing. And again, I had to immerse myself into, you know, what it meant. And it took a very, very long time. It took 6.5 years of my life to complete the national symbols, and that was, of course, completed under Thabo Mbeki.
Yeah. You strike me as somebody who has the ability to be in the forefront, to be in the public eye, but you seem not to do that.
Yes.
And yet you still seem to really capture people's imagination. When they need your service, they think of you. I'm wondering, what is this unique value proposition that you have, that you bring into every space that you occupy?
Well, it's always about trying to make a difference. In other words, really being the best that I can be at what I do. So when I'm given a new task or a new challenge, I kind of set about it single-mindedly. I'm extremely focused at the task at hand, and, you know, and delivering results. It does take a lot of hard work, but in the end, I guess what I have managed to establish is a track record for delivery.
Yeah.
And so when people think without creating a lot of noise, if people think about who can they call on with such a track record, then I guess I'm one of a number of people. And I think that's a good, it's a good feeling, doing a job well, even though in the middle of that national orders I never thought I could really finish the task, because it was an enormous task. You know, you kind of stick in there, you persevere, and at the end, you know, you look back and you say, that was a job well done. You establish a good foundation, and you know, new people coming in can take it forward. Having said that, I spent 16 years of my life chairing the National Orders Council, the President's Advisory Council on National Orders. It was incredibly rewarding, but I think perhaps a little bit too long. I'm a very firm believer in succession and renewal, and therefore, you know, I like to think of work or commitments in 5-year terms.
Yeah.
Never quite reached 5 full years, because the world moves so fast that after 3 years, you know, you're ready almost to be redeployed, as what we called it in the olden days. But I like to keep a very good balance between public sector and private sector interests.
Yeah.
I guess the public sector is our contribution. It's the giving back part.
It makes us feel good, doesn't it?
It does rather.
Yeah.
And I guess there are not a lot of people who are committed to, you know, necessarily to doing, to have, you know, can say a job well done.
Yeah. Thinking of the private sector particularly,
Yes.
We have some challenges with regards to transformation.
Yes, certainly.
What are the attitudes or views that are hindering transformation, and what can we do to break through this hurdle so that we can become a different South Africa?
I think the important thing is to raise leaders, corporate leaders in South Africa that think differently, that are not threatened by difference, because part of our corporate culture is that we can become too insular.
Yeah.
And so leaders tend to go out and hire people who are like them and who think like them and who are similar to them. In fact, you can often see them coming even from the same high schools. So if we can introduce even more than race and gender diversity, a diversity of thought and approaches and skill sets, we can begin to appreciate people who bring different value to organizations. It is a very good thing that we have transformation targets, because it keeps people focused to achieving those. But nevertheless, I think the broader kind of approaches and mindsets that is required for transformation, that needs to be appreciated more, so that you have build corporations where people come from various backgrounds and qualifications. And I mean, my life proves that with a social science background and academic background, you can be equally competent in public sector executive management as well as private sector executive management.
Which is a mindset we really need to change, because that's sometimes used as an excuse. But also just thinking of these environments in terms of private sector and public sector. And in South Africa, when we look at helping each other and supporting each other, whether we're entrepreneurs or whether we're professionals, sometimes we get caught up in the whole perception of corruption.
Yes, precisely.
How do we really handle this better so that we don't leave each other hanging, where we don't support each other, but at the same time we're not marred in this perception of corruption?
I think the first thing is to create that kind of network, which is like an alumni type network of black professionals. And then the next thing is to be able to be each other's safety net, so that if we see someone kind of erring, that we call out the person, we reach out rather. When I say call out, I don't mean in public. I mean you reach out and provide the necessary guidance and advice, particularly young professionals. And also it's about just learning, what are the things that constitutes a conflict of interest, having respect for processes and procedures, and sticking to those, and being mindful. I've trained my staff very often to say that there's certain kinds of mistakes you don't want to do ever, because it follows you for the rest of your life, basically.
And your reputation precedes.
Reputation, absolutely, and so therefore anything relating to financial mismanagement, fraud, corruption, those things stick, and you can't get rid of it very easily. And so, build, just take the hard route. When something comes easy, you really have to be very cautious about it. So it's difficult to bring that message across at times, particularly with younger millennials that are impatient, and they do want to get from point A to point B very fast, but the road is paved with booby traps. And so I guess it is about learning that kind of almost professional antenna, having that professional antenna to take the long view and watch out for those booby traps.
You know, in South Africa, we have kind of complex relationships, especially with the category we call black,
Yes.
which in South Africa is colored, Indian, and African.
Yes.
What do you think of those dynamics? What could we be doing better? Because we seem to still be stuck on the ladder
Yeah.
that was created by apartheid, where we all trying to assert that we are better than the other, and we're not really seeing each other as brothers and sisters.
Yes.
What could we be doing better?
I'm afraid that is almost the legacy of the unintended consequences of redress. We knew right in 1994 that if we were going to change the landscape of executive management, and we needed to do it quite fast, that you put in place what was in those years called an affirmative action policy that required that people had to still be categorized in those categories. And so all the transformation programs are aimed at keeping us in our categories, if one thinks about it in that way. But until one reaches a phase of equality, we would still need those. However, I mean, if I think back of the 70s, the Black consciousness movement created a sense of solidarity and being able to rise above those categories that we found ourselves in. And so you need a kind of national vision and leadership of social cohesion that goes beyond rhetoric. It's about the way in which we constitute our panels, our commissions, our boards of companies and state-owned enterprises that should be truly representative, and then represents the best that South Africa has to offer. Because when people are together, we are all quite alike in our aspirations, but it requires very dedicated leadership to keep providing the glue that holds the country together. Regrettably, the last 10 years or so, we've had a leadership that has divided the country rather than brought us together. My hope has always been on the younger generation, the millennials and post-millennials, because they grow up with a different value system, and they're not so stuck on categories.
Until we make them. A co-chair of mine shared a painful story of her child is 18 months and was playing in the grounds.
Yes.
So the helper later communicated that the other white kids who were older said, "We do not want to play with darkies." And so sharing that story was painful, because she was like, how am I going to start maneuvering this territory of having to educate my child?
Correct.
Because at the moment she's not speaking, but at some point she'll be able to answer, and what kind of answer. So South Africa is really at that cusp where we need to decide, what future we want.
Absolutely.
But thinking about that as well in the younger generation, I know you're kind of passionate about managing upwards, in terms of bosses. I don't like that word, but people still use
absolutely.
boss. What advice do you give? Because I find in the work that I do that a lot of stress comes from not being able to manage that energy that's coming up, and being afraid for your future and your position.
Absolutely.
What tips can you share there?
Absolutely. And the reason I'm so passionate about it is because I singularly failed at it. I was completely lousy at managing upwards because my being so single-minded and focused, I focus on the task and don't manage the relations. So, and I think that a lot of people fall out of the executive race by and large because they struggle to manage upwards. In fact, these days you have whole modules at Harvard Business School and every other business school about managing. Gibbs too now, managing upwards, absolutely. But What I would say is it's very important for young people to develop that kind of relationship with the leaders at the next tier above them, to find good mentors perhaps there, to listen, to be respectful, but most importantly, at any particular level, one has to be able to deliver. And being able to deliver means you're reliable and trustworthy, and that takes a lot of stress off the upper levels of management. Because what we often forget is that those are also human beings.
Yes.
And communication is vital. And if you do your job really well, and one is responsive to what and in tune with what your leader needs, you know, you could really help things quite a lot. Having said that, there is no excuse for abusive and overpowering and over-domineering and excessively hierarchical and autocratic leadership styles. And more often than not, we have too much of that. People in executive management carry a lot of stress on a daily basis and come down on their subordinates. Now, one of the lessons I learned in the public service during the Mandela days is in the public service, I had a mentor that comes out of the de Klerk era. But what an incredible leader and an incredible good human being, Dr. Roo Venter.
Yeah.
And he served the Mandela government in an unparalleled level. And he gave me very good advice, because I got angry once with a subordinate because it was about the third time I'd sent back a submission to be redone. And by the third time, I raised my voice a little bit. And the gentleman, a young white gentleman, started shaking in front of me. And I took note of that. And I said, please, I've given you all the guidance. Please go back and redo it and then come back to me. And we'll work on it. And I went immediately to the office of the chairman of the Public Service Commission, Dr. Roo Venter. And he said to me, I said, I saw this young man shaking, but I didn't think I was that harsh. He said, in your position, Yvonne, you can never afford to lose your temper, because you come down on a subordinate with the full authority of your office and your position. And that is enormous power. And since then, I always remembered that.
To be measured.
Absolutely, to be measured.
Yeah.
Notwithstanding the amount of stress I am under.
Yes. It's always a difficult balance, isn't it?
It's a difficult balance, but somehow that stuck with me forever.
I think it's going to stick with me as well. What do you do for fun?
For fun, I love reading, I love theater, and I love movies.
Yeah.
My family and kids always tease, Mom likes cinema nouveau movies. I do rather love the art movies.
Yes. I used to love them as a child. Isn't that scary?
I love walking too.
Yeah. Okay. Have you done the Spanish walk?
No, I don't. Oh, no. I'm afraid I've settled for less walking these days and more for mindful movement.
Yeah.
I do mindful movement in my Pilates classes. Well, I do one-on-one sessions and classes sort of 3 times a week. It keeps me both sane and it keeps my body sort of functioning.
Yeah. You know that we usually say the fish rots from the head.
Yes, that's right.
And we sometimes blame leaders for what the followers do, because we say, well, the leader.
Right.
Do you buy into that? Do you really think as followers, whether we're staff or the nation, what the leader does gives us license to be who they are if we're not very supportive of what character they are?
So that's a double-loaded question.
Yes.
But starting with the leader, I think it's important to lead from the front and to lead by example. But having said that, leadership is not singular. So therefore, it is about developing more leaders. It is very difficult to respect a leader who says, do as I say and not do as I do. And therefore, there is a responsibility to leadership. If one's followers are doing wrong things, if I can put it that way, it is your responsibility to point that out and to intervene. And the higher you are, the more authority and more responsibility you have in your position, the more compelling it is that you intervene and take responsibility. There's a phrase called "not in my name."
Yes.
And so I think it is very important for leaders to live the example of what they want others to be.
Yeah, because it seems like globally something has been unleashed.
Yes.
The types of leaders we have
Yes.
are giving people permission. My perception is we are given permission to be who we are. It's not that they are changing us.
Yes.
And that's the part that scares me.
Correct.
To say, what does it say about us?
Correct.
If it's so easy to emulate,
Yeah.
whether it's a racist leader or it's a corrupt leader, I kind of am very concerned about that.
The kind of leaders that we have globally basically bring out the worst in people, because you can have leadership that can inspire people to be better than themselves, basically. And then you have leadership that bring out the worst in us. We've had that kind of leadership in South Africa over the last 10 years, and we have that leadership cropping up globally everywhere. It's a swing towards authoritarianism. But the question is why? And I think that in times of uncertainty, in times of economic distress, in the wake of the global economic crisis, people are attracted to strong leaders. Now, strong leaders can also be good leaders, but they can also be bad leaders, essentially. And I think we are going through that phase. But I think that hopefully it will self-correct as moral and ethical leaders begin to reassert themselves.
Yeah.
And we saw that with the last speech Barack Obama made in relation to Donald Trump. We see that emerging in South Africa as well.
Yeah. When a person calls you a leader, what does that conjure up in your mind? And do you embrace that label readily?
I should say perhaps reluctantly, but what it does evoke is responsibility. It evokes accountability. But I do believe that, one can naturally lead. And then it relates to the style of leadership. So one doesn't have to lead by shouting or, bullying people. The kind of quiet leadership that lots of women leaders have is the kind of leadership that is enabling and nurturing. Because for me, maybe it's the education in my background that makes me always think about what legacy do you leave, how do you develop the next generation.
Yeah.
It is often not just about yourself, but about how do you give back and develop the next generation.
And it is genuine, because I met you being interviewed for a board.
Oh, yes.
And then you called.
Yes.
We spent an hour
Yes.
to say you were not successful in this one, but there are qualities that we saw.
Absolutely.
And I would like to be part of that journey to offer you an opportunity in the future. You don't really come across human beings like you, so don't think you are normal. And we are very appreciative of it, because people talk about legacies and the next generation, but we get to these positions and we don't really let other people, come up. So thank you so much for that. What book have you read in 2018 that really made an impression on you, and why did it make an impression on you?
I try not to flood people's inboxes with too much literature, but it's the one I sent you called Inside Knowledge by Alison Temperley. And it's really about women. She writes about women in professional organizations and the challenges they face to rise through the organization. And what she points out is that it's a mistake to think that women are not ambitious. Women are quietly ambitious. But I think that if we can equate our ambition with goal setting, perhaps we can be more focused. She also talks about how to become more present and how to make an impression, but also about, communicating what it is that you do and what is that you do well, because we often do the work and never
without
blow
seeming
our
to be boasting, because that also doesn't go down well.
Yes, but it's about almost building your confidence, and to do that you need a very strong sense of self. So you have to pay attention. We have to pay attention to ourselves. Sort of taking a check-in, she suggests, on a monthly basis of where am I in my life, what are the things that I would still like to achieve over the next 3 to 5 years, what are the things that I can offload or shed, and finding the things that drain our energy and offloading it. And then looking at the things that re-energize ourselves, because that self-care is so important. It's something that I did not do very well. I did not manage the work-life balance extremely well. And because, I used to say WWW stands for work, 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 and it becomes overwhelming. So much later in life, it's women being there for each other and checking in. How are you doing with self-care? Your work is excellent, you are moving up the ranks, etc. And so even at our level of experience and maturity, it's still important that we kind of take care of each other. I see my role as ensuring that more black women can have voices and seats at the table. So when I met you, I've read much about you and your work, but when I met you, there was an immediate rapport, and I said, that is, if I can create space to bring on board more black women leaders, because those are the voices that we need to hear in corporate South Africa, then we would be successful. We're not doing well at all in corporate South Africa, but better in government and in parliament, public sector, but really, really not doing well.
What's still on your bucket list to achieve?
I'd first thought perhaps I should chair a large board. I consciously, after working for 20 years in very large organizations, some global organizations, I consciously decided to take time out and focus on building smaller organizations. And then said, perhaps at some point I should step up again. But this morning, I rethought that, and I thought perhaps I should make sure that I travel to a different country at least once a year and take a week or so time out. And so perhaps I need to, I took my children when I was still working as an executive once a year on an overseas holiday, and I took them to a different continent every year. And the only reason for doing that and spending so much money was really so that I could open their minds and open their horizons. And now I'm thinking that to re-energize myself, I should just go somewhere
Yes.
completely different. So last year I went to Zanzibar. This year I'm still working on it.
And thinking about it. I try and do that, incorporate it in my holiday, but
Yes.
also meet other business leaders and understand what's going on in different economies. As we close, is there something you want to share that we haven't touched on?
Yes, I think that it's important for people to recognize that success comes with hard work. There are no real shortcuts. Some people, I do still believe in luck. Sometimes, one will be lucky, but that does not happen to quite a lot of people. So, because once you've established a track record for hard work and for solid delivery, no one can ever take that away from you. And so it's not an easy message. It's not something that young people in particular would like to hear. But if we can sort of almost embed that in our DNA, I think, we can make a real difference in whatever you do.
I totally buy into that. Thank you so much. I've really enjoyed that. And as you know, we can go on for another few hours. Thank you so much for joining us. I hope you enjoyed that. And join us next time for our Wisdom Personified Conversations with Dudu Msomi.